Carol, I think you can stop the music. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first Women in Power event of the year. Let's wait a couple more minutes for people to roll in, and we'll start the event very, very soon. Okay, you can continue the music. Cool. So welcome everyone to the first event of the year for Women in Power. My name is Alicia and I'll be your host for the day as usual. And today we are so happy to have Su Wern as our guest. And Su Wern is a connector, community builder, and future product leader. She's an expert in she's an expert in FemTech, and she's the Strategic Development Analyst at 500 Southeast Asia, where she leads community-driven efforts across the fund and supports their 250 over portfolio companies with their fundraising strategy. And she was also very active in the FemTech scene, where she was the program manager at FemTech Focus and also venture partner at Coyote Ventures and the venture associate at the Houston Angel Network. She actually spent some time also in the US, and now she's back in KL at 500 Southeast Asia. And of course, I'll also let her introduce herself a little bit more, but we'll go to the next slide. We'll do a little intro of the day, and we'll start for the 45 minutes interview session with Su Wern. So these are our partners for the event today. So we have myself, I am the CEO of Qfinity, and we are a China ASEAN cross-border tech accelerator where we do talent incubation, technology landing, and acceleration within the region. And we also have founders there where we have founders there, co-founder and CTO Fabian with us today. And founders there actually help founders connect to growth opportunities as well as build international bridges and expand network. And we also have Mia Ovum. Mia Ovum is actually a FemTech based in Thailand, where Fabian is also a co-founder. And Mia Ovum connects educated professional women to the best egg freezing clinics and hospitals in Thailand. So about today, we will dive into VC and FemTech a little more, specifically talking about Su Wern's career path of entering the VC industry, and also an introduction of what FemTech is and an overview market landscape across US, where she first started her FemTech career, and in Southeast Asia, and also to understand the different perspectives of founders as well as VC. And just a little bit of background information about FemTech. So I found this report, and this is why we were also very interested in FemTech, because as you can see, the interest in FemTech is really boosting after the year like 2008-ish, and you can see that right now it's actually still shooting up, especially in the funding part, where you can see it actually hit $2.5 billion in the year 2021. And on the left, you are able to see the different FemTech startup types, and also the distribution of the different types of FemTech. And we'll dive into what FemTech is and also the different trends with Su Wern. Yes, so now we will start the session. So Su Wern, can you give us an introduction of yourself to start?
Yeah, No, happy to start. And so obviously thank you for the introduction earlier. I guess what I'm trying to think like things that you've not mentioned, but I guess to kind of rewind it a little bit back. So right now I'm currently at 500 Southeast Asia, and so a little bit about 500 and 500 Southeast Asia. So 500 started out as a accelerator based in California, the United States, and so the flagship accelerator also spun out its own like flagship funds, and so since then it has been around for like almost like 2 decades now. And the 500 Southeast Asia Fund itself is one of the biggest funds in its global like regional funds, besides the HQ fund based in the US. And so we're on our third fund now. We invest across many different industries. And so I would say like health and wellness is one of them, but not really, a strong like footing in femtech necessarily, but very industry agnostic. And so I help on the more like post-investment side, supporting our portfolio companies. We have about 250, so it's really a broad range of companies that I really support with, and also I drive community-driven initiatives at the fund right now. But to rewind a little bit back, I studied finance, and so I honestly was not going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do upon graduation when I studied that. I couldn't really imagine myself going a typical like finance banking route, and so it was very serendipitous. I kind of discovered the whole world of like startups and everything. I took this one class called Women in Entrepreneurship, and it kind of like opened the doors for me in terms of like startups and VC and entrepreneurship, because we had a lot of like female founders and female VCs come and speak to us. And the opportunity came up to intern with FemTech Focus at a time. And so at FemTech Focus at a time was really just like the co-founder Brittany and her idea of like starting a podcast or like starting a community focused around femtech. And before that, she was also at another big VC based in Texas. And so this the whole time I was based in Texas, in the US. And I joined early on, helping her, build out like events, programming, the community overall, launching the podcast, which was like an entire like new experience for me. Also as a fresh grad, like everything I was doing was really hands-on and a huge learning opportunity for myself. But since then it turned into a full-time opportunity, and I was pretty much like the only full-time employee there for a long time, helping grow a lot of our current initiatives to what they are today. And since I've left, we have like about 2,000 plus community members worldwide. We've hosted like 40 events. We hosted like our own summit, our jobs fair, and yeah, we're able to grow so much from what we started with, so that's really exciting. And then later on I joined as a venture partner for Coyote Ventures, which is a femtech focused early stage seed stage venture fund. And so we invested in a bunch of different women's health companies. I was helping on the investment side of things, so I was helping with due diligence and screening of these companies. And being in the investment side is really different from now being in the post investment side. And so that was really interesting. Like I got to learn a lot about what it took to really evaluate for investment, like what were we looking for in these companies, how to really like do proper due diligence before like making those investment decisions. And really like that stemmed from the work that I was doing previously at FemTech Focus, where a lot of my role was focusing on our femtech founders, who naturally a lot of them were female. I think about 70 to 80% of femtech founders are female, and so a lot of the founders that I was speaking with were having a huge obstacles with fundraising. And so that was kind of like where like the whole spectrum of VC like piqued my interest, and that was like a natural curiosity of mine. And so yeah, that's like a brief background of where I was before, but then now I moved back here to join 500. So yeah.
That's awesome, and congrats on your new role, because I know you
you know,
recently just joined.
you know
Late last year, was it or was it this year?
yeah, it's like 2 months ago. So it
Wow.
feels like a long, it's like
So
a feels like long time, but also like not at the same time, so
seems intense. Seems like you had a I mean, because you just came back from the US after so many months, I mean years of being in the US and coming back, new job, n- new place, new place, old place, kind of like
yeah,
familiar and rediscovering a new place, an
yeah,
old place, sorry.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so from your I mean, I guess you also touched a little more on how you got into where you are right now. So, from your experiences in both the US and in Southeast Asia, what are the differences between these two regions from your experience in terms of VC and the market landscape?
Mm. I would say like compared to a lot of people who have been in VC, I don't think I've been there for that long. Like I've been there for about a year-ish in the States, and then now like starting again in a different like region and geographical focus here in Southeast Asia. And so like comparing US to Southeast Asia, the US like VC landscape has been around for like the longest time. And even like in terms of startups, so you can't like talk about VC and not touch upon like entrepreneurship and startups, but even that those landscapes in of itself are so like different, not just like culturally, but just like the sheer size and number and funding and opportunities that's happening in the space. Um, and I think like there's actually so many interesting things that are happening in Southeast Asia's like tech, VC, startup landscape in of itself, like with all the new things that's been happening with like Grab and Bukalapak, and also like Malaysia's first unicorn, Karsam, like we pretty recently also coincidentally all 500 portfolio companies. Um, it's been really interesting. I think like now is the best time to really get into the like Southeast Asian like tech ecosystem. So I think it's the most exciting time is always like now the present time. But like really comparing the two, there's like so many things that are really different, but also it's like comparing like a landscape that has been around for a long time, and really because of that, like if you throw I use this analogy sometimes, like if you throw a rock in the US, I feel like you'd hit like a startup founder or VC, whereas here it's like considered a very niche industry still, and like entrepreneurship is like generally like a really not foreign but newer concept that are trying to get introduced into colleges and like younger people, and like really taking up that um I guess like pathway of like being a startup founder, or like being into entrepreneurship, or like running a tech startup, which is very different to like running a small business. And I think like the cultural change to those things have also been like more recent developments that I think will just continue to like grow, and it's really interesting to see, I think. So yeah, I think like that's, yeah, so I'm really excited to see like how it grows in like the coming years or so. Yeah.
Super awesome. And do you see similarities in terms of like when you were in US? Because you were also in very into the entrepreneurial and VC student community. So
Mm.
how do you contrast that in when you look at how what Southeast Asia is doing in terms of the student entrepreneurship and VC thing? Because in US, I believe it was more mature. But do you see similarities in how it is developing or how like the government policies are going about it?
Mm. I think like nowadays, like a lot of countries in Southeast Asia actually do have a lot of more resources, way more resources and opportunities and um, support systems, I would say, like compared to like even a decade ago, like 10 years ago or less. And I think like that's like a growing trend. I think both in both sides of it, it's still a growing trend. But I think like if you're talking about like the younger generation, or like the whole like startup ecosystem for students, comparing the two, um, there are still regions in the US that, like are just not as established entrepreneurially than there are in like the Ivy League schools like Berkeley, or like more entrepreneurship focused schools like Berkeley, or like Stanford and stuff like that. And even the school I graduated from, which was University of Houston, like we had a really strong entrepreneurship program, but we didn't have like the sheer number or strength of like really successful startups that bring the spotlight back to my school, or like back to the ecosystem. And I think like that is something that ecosystems there, still like some colleges there and ecosystems here to have in common. It's like getting those sheer amount of attention and like success stories to those schools, to those ecosystems, that really will help it grow in the long run. And I think like it is getting there, like there's more resources now. And I think like another thing is that like nowadays, I mean, I'm part of Gen Z, and like Gen Zs, I feel like we have grew up with like with a lot of tech. We know what we like and we don't like with like a lot of tech products nowadays. We're like, how come it's so hard for me to like, we're really I would say like really hard on UI UX and like experiences with tech nowadays. Like if it's something is really hard for me to sign up for, I'm like, oh my gosh, why is the UI for this so like clunky? And like we grew up, naturally knowing how to use these like kinds of like interfaces. And so I think that coupled with the fact that like nowadays, even when we see, we're living through like COVID and everything that's happening right now, like we are also naturally a generation that's taking things into our own hands. And also nowadays, there's a lot more tools for entrepreneurship and building things by ourselves, more so than any other ways. And so you can really get into entrepreneurship, with a lot less capital or formal ways of getting into, starting your own business than there were any other previous year. And I think that will speak a lot to, the types of companies that we'll see and like the sheer amount of companies that will be growing. And I think that's like a similarity that's across like any region. And it's just really like us as a generation that's kind of spearheading that and like taking that into our own hands. So yeah, I think that's like a huge similarity I see across it. And like our whole mindset, as a generation towards breaking things in a good way, like breaking things and building back up and like wanting to change the way things are. I think that's also like a huge generational like cultural thing that translates directly to entrepreneurship and innovation. So yeah.
Wow, that's great. You summarized it very well. Um,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, and everyone here, please follow Su Wern on Twitter, because I feel like the things you tweet about, it really is representative of Gen Z, as you mentioned. So it's great to hear you summarize it in this way. Um, so let's dive into FemTech a little more.
Yeah.
Um, because you spend, a huge chunk of your career in FemTech. So when you started your career in the FemTech industry in the US, what inspired you to take the initiative? Of course, you touched on it a little bit, but you can also expand it a little bit more.
Yeah. The really short answer is that it was super serendipitous, and it was like totally not intentional. It's funny because I genuinely think I'm a very intentional person. I'm choosing to be in VC. Like I really want to be in this ecosystems and like I care about these things. But FemTech was super serendipitous, but in the best way possible. Like when I discovered it, I was taking a class in women entrepreneurship, and I had actually the co-founder of FemTech Focus speak about it as an opportunity. And at a time also, like I mean I still am now very passionate about gender equity and like social impact and stuff, and so it really aligned with those interests of mine. And even at a time and still now, I'm still like I don't really see myself working for a cause that I don't care about, so it's definitely like a why, for me. And so I think like femtech for me was really filling up that opportunity and like something that I'm really passionate about doing and like spending my time towards. And so it was also at the height of the pandemic at a time. It was like early 2020, so it was a time where things were shutting down. We don't know what the world is going to look like. Is everything just going to blow up? Like what is the rest of 2020 going to look like? And so it kind of came as a really good timed opportunity. And yeah, it really turned into something that I couldn't really like expect or see, but in like the best way possible. And I think like femtech in of itself is not like that new, that it was created at a time. It's been around for a long time, but just really never had like a huge cause or term that really brought everyone together with. And so like even femtech as a term was only coined in like 2013 or something like that by Ida Tin, who is the co-founder or founder of Clue. And so that's like a tracking app for period cycles. And and so it really became as like a whole movement. And I think like the pandemic, with everything that the focuses on health and wellness in general, and like digital tech and like tech enablement of health solutions, it really propel the whole femtech movement in of itself. And so I think the timing was really great in that too.
Mhm. And because you started it in the US also,
Mhm.
and you mentioned that even after you come back to Southeast Asia, you also got in touch with FemTech and also understanding FemTech in Southeast Asia. So how would you sort of describe the current stage of FemTech in Southeast Asia compared to what you have seen in the US and other parts of the world?
Yeah. Um, I feel like I'm still, I mean, every day I'm still learning more and more about like the femtech landscape in general. And even to the Southeast Asian like femtech landscape, like there's still, I think this is like speaks a lot to femtech's obstacles, which is one is we still lack a lot of information on who's doing what, who are the big market players, like who are the really successful femtech companies, and like tracking all of that like historical information, because it's still considered a very like new and nascent industry in of itself. And so even for like the Southeast Asian like femtech scene, the most comprehensive like market map I could find was by Fermata, which is like a Japanese-based femtech company, also VC fund, and they're basically a marketplace for femtech products. And so I think they recently also launched in Singapore, which is really cool. So it's like kind of close to me, but like not close enough because I'm based in Malaysia, in KL. And I think like within that market map, it was only like about 40 companies compared to FemTech Focus's database. When I was still there, we had about 700, and I think it's way more now. And so 40 out of 700, I think we can do much better than that. But also at the same time, like even doing health products in general, like across different countries, is really hard because there's so many obstacles and challenges that comes within like, health regulations and all these kind of things. Whereas in the US, you have all these different like state regulations as well. And like when it comes to like medical devices or diagnostics, there's a lot of different regulations that you deal with geographically. So even no matter where you still market or launch your femtech product, there's still a lot of regulatory challenges depending on your geographical location. And also like the current state of general cultural acceptance of femtech and women's health in general. I think like, growing up here, because I grew up, in Malaysia, and a lot of things that I learned about women's health and femtech were things that I learned in the US, really. And so it's really different comparing what I know then or knew then, or what I didn't know then, more so, to what I know now. And even now I'm still like learning a lot from everything that I read and like people that I speak to in the femtech space. And so like similar to how Southeast Asia's general tech and startup scene is still in its very like nascent stages compared to the US, I think femtech here also kind of is mimicking and following in those footsteps. But I would say like there are similarities, like the three main industries in the US for femtech, or verticals, I should say, verticals in femtech would be menstruation, fertility, and also like reproductive / like sexual health. And it's pretty much similar in femtech in Southeast Asia or Asia in general as well. And so I think like we are not really like far behind. And so I don't think that's something that we should like hang on to, but more so like we're actually in the right pathways for opening up more and more, minds about femtech, or like opportunities and growth around femtech in general. And there are like cultural differences. So I can like I know I've been like speaking for a while, so maybe I'll like
No, go on, go on. Because you're also answering some of the questions that I wanted to ask. So
okay.
yes, you're doing great.
I was like what's going on in my soapbox. No, but it's really interesting too, because there are like a lot of, I would say like similarities in terms of like, where femtech was in the US or North America long time ago is kind of where we are now. And so like if we follow down that path, I think we'll kind of see that growth. But even then, it's not to say that like the femtech space globally is doing is like at its perfect stage. It will never, it's not never, but it's hard to reach there right now. I think like there's still so much more to go. Like it was only recently that a lot of like femtech companies were getting ways to really publicly market their products. And there's still a lot of regulations and blockage of ads and all those like obstacles that a lot of startups don't, or like even normal health startups don't really go through, that don't like necessarily target women's health. And so I think like even in that sense, there's a lot of battles to still be fought. But the interesting thing about different geographical women's health focuses is that there's so many ways that we as a society also like treat women's health differently. Like for example, like how in North America, it's the culture around tampons is super different to the culture around tampons here. And the concept of like wearing reusable underwear for menstruation also is very different. And so like I've seen so many more like accepting people around here in like wearing reusable underwear for more like sustainable ways of going about menstruation than I have really in the US, which is really interesting to me. And then like also the way that we think about families and the way we think about like motherhood here and growing older here is also really different. And I think like because of that, we cannot just rely on other femtech companies that are not based or don't have the cultural competencies to understand the market that they are there versus like here. And so that's why there is still a huge need to have very femtech focused Southeast Asian femtech focused companies spinning out of here and like really knowing what the culture is like, because it's so different. Even though they're building pretty much almost the same thing, right? And so like the messaging behind it, the values behind it would be super different compared to the ones in other countries. But yeah, I guess to like sum it up too, is that a lot of the femtech companies that we've seen when I was there had very similar formulas to success. And so there were like three main parts of the equation. One was building a femtech company that had a really strong community, and that's why I'm super bullish on like community driven companies and products, and building those really healthy network strong communities. Second is femtech startups that have like an educational like element. I think something I kind of touched on but not really was the fact that like a lot of things that we know about women's health, things that we don't know about women's health still are very like common. It's like it's normal to like not know everything, and it's normal to it's almost like a normalized thing to like really be learning about your body as you got much older. And we don't know because of like the formalized education pieces like missing when in our childhood, or even as a society, like whether we talk about these things or have these conversations. Like even amongst my friend group, I'm super vocal about all these things, but it's not like typical for someone to really be, at least not even in Asia. And so like a lot of these companies have to really educate around their product, or like educate about like sexual wellness or like menstruation or like ways to deal with or like menstrual hygiene, for example. And then the third one is really just having an effective product. Like if you have a great product that women love using, they are gonna really stick with it. And it's very different to you launching a makeup brand and like getting people to try your new lipstick or whatever, versus like you launching let's say like a UTI product or a specific type of pad or something. Like even for me, like my personal anecdote is that like when I started menstruating too, my mom was the one who bought my pads for me and like introduced me to that whole like menstrual hygiene thing. And so like when you capture, like let's say we capture me as your consumer, I'm more likely to just be like, oh, I'm gonna suggest the same products to all of my friends, all of my family members, all of my future children, if I ever have children, because I know and I trust these products, which are like really intimate to me. And so like the way we like go about that whole like customer acquisition also be really different compared to like a lot of other consumer products. So yeah, hope that like wraps it up.
Yeah, thank you so much for the really detailed sort of logic of how important it actually is to understand, the cultural aspect of it and how unique this femtech industry is compared to other tech industries, because it's so intimate and it has a lot of stigma around it as well. And it's just different on its own to other like normal SaaS products or tech products.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question that we have is about because I know that you have written a white paper on FemTech in your previous role. So can you share some of the findings in the report or anything that you find useful for the audience to understand a little bit more of what FemTech is?
Yeah, no, but yeah, I will say that I just contributed, so I don't want to take full credit for the white paper whatsoever. It was definitely a whole team effort on our part. And one of the biggest reasons why we even wrote the white paper was just the fact that there's so much lacking of research and like research dollars really put into femtech or women's health in general, that even writing the white paper was really hard. It took a long time. Like we kept having to push the date when we were going to release it, because we were like, we need to find this number, we need to like dig this up and all that kind of stuff. And so it just goes to show, like, even that project in of itself goes to show that we still need a lot more people looking into and researching and doing work to really discover, you know, aspects of women's health that we just don't know yet, and or it's just not published publicly, or it's just not as accessible information. And so like even when we were doing this paper, the Frost and Sullivan report was probably the most like comprehensive slash like well-known, accessible one at a time. And that report itself was showcasing that femtech as a industry would be worth $50 billion US dollars by 2025, I believe. And so for our co-founders, they were like in total disbelief of this number. That's like no way that this market could only be worth 50 billion US dollars, because like literally half of our planet is made up of women. And like for us, we fundamentally believe that femtech affects everyone, like not just women, because like women birth people, not just women. And then like, you know, uplifting women on our own also lifts up society as a whole. And so like we have women who function in society, like we contribute to like economies, like we make majority of the household decisions. So all these like different things that we were really like, there's no way, we have to like disprove this. Like it's such a huge opportunity that it's just not given the appropriate credit, or it's not been backed really with the numbers and facts and like research. And so that's what we did. I think that's like the main goal we went in doing. And actually, to rewind a bit, I totally forgot to mention what I consider, or like what FemTech Focus at the time also considered FemTech to be. And so for us, like we define FemTech as any like women's health or wellness condition that solely or disproportionately or differently affects women. And so in women also we included like women across the spectrum, like trans women, or just anyone who really identifies themselves as a woman or female. And so I know there's a lot of debate around like femtech as a term, like is it exclusionary to people who are who identify themselves as women but like don't like the femme term, or like don't really consider themselves femme. And so like there's been a lot of discussions like around that, and to be honest, I don't think there's like a perfect solution to it. I think the perfect solution actually would be just considering femtech health like people health, you know, because like I said, like I think it affects like everyone, not just like women in our own like silos in our corner of the room, right? Like it affects everyone, like your mother, your daughter, everyone. But I think like in an effort to really shine the spotlight and get femtech or women's health in general, women's health products and services and research funding and all these kind of things, the attention that it deserves, would be to have a all-encompassing, or you know, placeholder of a term that really helps people get behind. And so like even with International Women's Day, like obviously I would wish that every day is, you know, International Women's Day, but you know, having a day that really symbolizes that, really gets people, you know, gives attention to that whole cause is really important. So that's kind of like my take on it. And hopefully in the future we don't have to have a term for it anymore. So that in of itself, I think like has a long ways to go. But going back to the report itself, there were a lot of things that we knew, but we just didn't like prove specifically or have it written down in a paper. And so like within the white paper itself, like we knew that there were a lot of femtech companies. So we, in addition to the white paper, we had a database. So I mentioned before, like we had about 700 plus companies when in the database across the world when I was still there. But I'm sure now it's more than that, like way more. And even within those companies, something that we would hear a lot from conversations that we were having with experts, like self-proclaimed experts in women's health, were saying like, what we need to have, our like first women's health unicorn, and we need to have like our first women's health exit. And as we did our own research, we found out that there have been multiple unicorns. So today, I think there's like 4 or 5, or a little bit more than that, at least 5 that we know of. And then there's been about 14 IPOs, and let me see, about 170 exits, company exits thus far in FemTech. And so those are huge numbers. Like, I am not saying this lightly at all. Like, this is from research that we've done last year over months of really digging into it. But it just goes to show that even experts who are in the space of women's health didn't also know the amount of successes they were already having. And it's not to really like berate on them at all. It's just the fact that like there's a lot more information and research that is just not as well projected around. And so I know that within the last year, Maven has been, in this under the spotlight as being like the first femtech unicorn across like the world and everything like that. And truth be told, that like I mentioned, there's actually multiple. So there's LV, which is a smart breast pump, and then there's also Flow Health, which is a tracking app for periods, so similar to Clue. Also Progeny, which does fertility benefits for employers and their employees. And so actually there's so many that we just don't really talk about. And so I think that's just something to like really highlight there, that actually there is a lot of success in femtech. And I think that the other goal that we were trying to do with the white paper was to prove that femtech is not just a niche industry. Like, it's not just about like getting women pregnant or like babies or like fertility. Like, it's not just that, even though within fertility there's like so many opportunities there. It's also to prove that in of itself it's a space that's worth innovating in, because there's so many white spaces. Like when Alicia sent the diagram of the McKinsey's like, it was like a whole, like, you can see all the white spaces that were present there. Like, there's so many things that still need innovating. Like, I still tell people we have put people on the moon, but we haven't figured out so many fundamental biological things about like women's bodies that we haven't even solved for yet. Like, menopause is a huge stage in a woman's life, and we still don't know everything about it. Like, we just tell women, oh, take Panadol like to help your headache, or like hot flashes. Like, we still don't know all these things. And so that was another goal for the white paper. The third one, which I think I'm a huge proponent for, and just why I'm still in VC, is the fact that we need to prove why femtech is a really huge investment opportunity. And so like I mentioned with the IPOs and the unicorns, it really shows the successes and the winners of the industry. And like when you talk about market sizes, like VCs love to know about like, how big is the market size? How big is this opportunity? How many dollars are going there? How many companies have been successful? And this white paper also helped prove that. And so I really hope that it really helps founders in the future, if not now, with really proving their investment case and really proving that there's real opportunity here. It's not just like hearsay, she say, here, like he said this, she said this is what I've seen, but like real like points and research that really backs that. And so like even within like the white paper, we saw a lot of companies ranging from different sectors, like medical devices, diagnostics, consumer products, marketplaces, logistics, supplements, telehealth, biotech, digital health, and really just like a huge array of products. And I think like that's something also we're trying to disprove. Like, again, with the opportunity showcase of what femtech really is, and in hopes of more femtech companies getting funded, more femtech companies getting founded, and more solutions and pain points really being solved for women in general. So I would say like those are like the biggest things that we were trying to do with the white paper. Yeah.
Awesome. And to everyone who don't know about the white paper, I will email everyone who's here today the white paper, because it honestly deserves attention, and it's very informative. Personally, I learned a lot through the white paper, and it's very recent. It came out last year.
Yeah, it came out like summer last year. So yeah, thank you for that. It's like a lot of hard work.
Of course. It's to do it justice.
Yes.
Um, okay, so the next question that I have is about the FemTech. I want to go back to FemTech and the Southeast Asian market more specifically. So, what are your opinions on how you see Southeast Asia developing FemTech over the next few years? And also, do you see FemTech as a potential hub in Southeast Asia as well? And perhaps you can also talk about some of the strategies for FemTech to garner some attention in the Southeast Asian market.
Yeah, no, it's all good questions. Um, hmm. Well, it's actually quite a loaded question, so let me think which one to tackle first. I would say like within like the coming years, above anything else, I'm like super hopeful about like where FemTech has to like can go, because we have a lot of advocates and people doing a lot of great things in the space. Like even though I mentioned like Formata's market map had like about 40 companies, 40 companies is still much better than 0. It's still much better than 5. It's still much better than 10. And I think that in of itself speaks to the need that FemTech just needs to be present in Southeast Asia. And I think another thing is it's hard to talk about FemTech and not discuss like gender bias or like cultural differences or nuances within Southeast Asia compared to maybe in North America or maybe in Europe or maybe Asia in general. Like we approach a lot of conversations about women very differently, or like growing up and like sexual education and reproductive education super differently. And so it would be doing FemTech total disservice if we don't like also tackle those kind of problems in tandem or in parallel to trying to grow FemTech as a tech category and investment opportunity and founder facing wise. And so I think like even within that there's like so many things to unpack, and I'm definitely would say I have not tackled a lot of like governmental or like very broad level things and initiatives towards like women's health on that level or scope as much as I would like to know. And I think like for FemTech to really grow to its full potential, it also needs that kind of support, and it needs that kind of advocates, like not just people on the ground, not entrepreneurs who are really vocal about their companies, which is awesome and great, but we also need allies and people in external places that are also pushing forward towards FemTech and supporting FemTech in like various ways. So one of the ways obviously is through funding and in like really putting dollars towards research projects and studies towards advancing women's health, because like our bodies are super different from other people's who don't have the same don't grow up in the same environment as us, like biologically, and like our diets are super different and all those kind of things, and like how height differences or like size differences, like all these kind of things are also things that we need to take into consideration when we develop FemTech products. And also too is in a very like governmental state level or like country level initiatives that really support us education wise and community wise about how we look at women's health. And so one of the biggest things, I think the biggest barrier for a lot of us is the systematic lack of education around like women's bodies in general. And also like even when we talk to children about it, like being like, ew, menstruation, like what a gross like state of your life. Like we cannot continue having those kind of conversations that really reinforce that negative bias towards talking about our bodies and our needs and our health, and how we view women and how we view women's needs as they grow older as well is super important into like this whole FemTech equation. And I think your second question was like how to really help FemTech become a hub in Southeast Asia. I think that FemTech is already a hub in Southeast Asia. Like that's my personal opinion. And also obviously not biased, but kind of biased, that I hope that it continues to be a hub and continues to grow and succeed. But I think like I would continue saying is that in the tech scene in general in Southeast Asia, we're in a very like exciting time in general. And so a lot of things are kind of lining up. Like there's a lot more women in tech now than there's ever been before. There's a lot more interest in entrepreneurship and startups and being a startup founder than there's ever been before. Same like resources wise and cultural readiness. I think like we're still the most open about these topics than we've ever been before. And so I think like there's really no time like the present. And there's also like a lot of big players in the market right now, like for example Fermata, and also organizations like FemTech Focus, and also FemTech Collective, Women of Wearables, FemTech Association of Asia, which I'm also like gladly plugging. So definitely I recommend people checking that out and joining if you haven't already. They are also doing like, really unsiloing, which is like bringing people together in the femtech community. And I think that's really what makes a hub grow. Like when you have people working together in tandem, supporting one another, both externally as allies, or if you're working the space, and really like pushing forward from that angle and together. And so I think, yeah, there's just so many things at play. And obviously I really hope that femtech continues to really grow and succeed in Southeast Asia, which I think it's already kind of doing. And I hope it gets easier and easier for more people to really get into the space and really do things in the space. And yeah.
Awesome. Now that's really awesome to hear your opinions, coming from a completely a completely other ecosystem in the
Different.
US. Yeah.
Yeah.
And coming back into Southeast Asia. So your perspective and your opinions is very valuable and is very motivating and inspirational for all of the other people in the space, or people who are looking to enter the space, and also to raise the awareness in Southeast Asia and in Asia in general. So thank you for the sharing. And at this point of our session, I will do a little bit of a shout out to some of the very special guests that we have in the participants. Because I was just looking at the list and I realized our VIP, Mr. Louis Lee, is here. So Louis is the CEO of Pacific Founder, where they focus on investments in Asian cross-border tech. And he's actually the first generation of digital asset capitalization expert. He has more than 10 years of experience in founding, investing, and exiting multiple unicorns with top-tier VCs and PEs. In the RCEP region, and he's currently managing also a portfolio that's quite big, over 5 billion, and he do a lot in the space in disruptive technology as well as innovation in the RCP region. So super glad to have Louis here. And I was also looking and I see that we have a founder of a femtech startup, Jessica. Welcome, Jessica. And Jessica is actually based in LA, and they are addressing period pain, and they are a women's beauty subscription box that offers products for complete beauty regimen. So super happy to also have Jessica here. Jessica, if you want to say something, feel free to unmute your mic as well. And also we have Jake. Jake is do you know Jake actually?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you
I
do.
think, yeah.
Yeah, so Jake also have quite similar backgrounds, I guess, because Jake was based in US for his uni days, and actually came back to Malaysia to be in the VC industry, and now he is in
Orbit,
venture cap in
yeah. At Orbit,
venture.
yeah. And I do know Jessica as well, so it's nice to see you again, Jessica. Yeah, it's crazy.
Super cool. Super cool.
It's funny. Yeah.
Awesome. This is super awesome, because what we're trying to do here is also to bring people together and amplify voices, and also to shine light on the more important topics like femtech in Southeast Asia. So I would actually open the floor up if there's anybody who has questions for Su Wern. Okay, while the questions roll in, I am going to ask one last question to perhaps sum it up a little. So, do you have a any advice for people who are building a femtech startup or wanting to join the VC industry? Um, any any advice or recommendations of materials that they can look into?
Yeah. I think I'll tackle the VC one first. So I think, like I mentioned, the VC landscape in Asia or Southeast Asia specifically is super different to the one in America. Like I feel like in North America, you throw a rock and like you hit a VC or like someone who is planning to be in VC, which is pretty insane. And so I think like for me, when I was trying to break in, I was already very curious about like what VC was, how those mindsets and like those decisions were being made, like how does capital get deployed, like all these different things, what makes a successful startup, all these kind of things. And so like when I was getting into the space, I had a lot of conversations with people. Like I had hundreds of conversations, like one-on-one chats. I don't even know how I would have like at least one every other day, just with like someone who's in the VC space, either like a potential founder or someone who is working in VC or already working with VCs. And so to really like understand what their thought processes were like, what the job function really was like, and understanding, the trends and what really it took to be a VC or be in VC. And so I think like through those conversations, I learned a lot more than I could have just just reading one book. And so I did read a lot in tandem with having those conversations and listening to a lot of podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And I think like actually what really exposed me to the VC ecosystem the most, which is going to sound really funny, but it's through Twitter and Clubhouse. And so and actually I met Alicia through Clubhouse back in 2020. So that's how we got connected, which is very full circle moment for me and Alicia. But I think like a lot of VCs are really vocal about what they're investing in, trends that they're seeing, companies they're excited about, tips and tricks and advice. And I think like that's a really interesting thing that I would recommend anyone who's trying to get into VC to really take advantage of, because like naturally a lot of these experts in the space are already sharing this kind of information willingly into the internet for free. And so I feel like that's something you should take advantage of. And a lot of them are very like people-centric operators. Like they want to have conversations with people, they want to like dig into people's brains, and so take advantage of that as well and like have conversations with people. And because VC is a very people business, like people-centric business, like it's about like who you know and like who you're connecting with and all that kind of stuff. And as much as I like hate, it's like a love-hate relationship. Like I'm definitely a very people-driven person, but also it's like very, how do you get in if you don't know any of these people? And so that's kind of like where Twitter comes in, LinkedIn comes in, and like making those cold requests, make those cold connections can also go a long way. Like it can open a lot more doors for you. And really just building up that like confidence. For me it was confidence, but I think for a lot of people also is just like understanding how it even works, like lowering the curtain to what a VC does in a day and like what their day in the life looks like. And I think once you get really started in that regard, like you just keep on going, you'll find that you'll find that it's either not for you or if it's for you, and ways that you can really get involved. And so I really encourage that, and hopefully through those connections you'll get an opportunity that arises and just works out, like Lego pieces fitting together. So yeah, but also like happy to answer any specific questions if anyone has regarding to it, even now or later, through LinkedIn or anything like that, or Twitter. So yeah. And I think the other question you had was about like being a FemTech founder. So I will disclaim that I have never been a founder or a FemTech founder myself. And so I don't know firsthand what it takes, although I do know a lot of the struggles and obstacles that a lot of FemTech founders were facing back when I was working at FemTech Focus. Because my role was very FemTech founder centric, like I was talking to founders like day in, day out, and like, really seeing how we could support them, like resources wise, or connecting them to anything that they may need. And I think like the hardest barrier is probably the market readiness, I think, for FemTech no matter where you are, and like a lot of cultural norms that you really have to battle. And naturally, I know a lot of FemTech founders are also female, so being a female founder also has its like biases that come to it. But I would say like trying your best not to really focus on those and really using to any of these things to your advantage really will set you apart. And I think like a lot of things in the Southeast Asian market, at least, is also a very first movers market right now because it's still in its very nascent stages. And so I think really use that to your advantage as well. And I guess advice for just being a founder in general is that there's so many resources nowadays, I think, that compared to in the past that you can tap into, and a lot of people who are willing to give this advice. And so joining communities where you feel supported, I think, is super important. Having a community that really focuses and supports you. And so like not to like, toot FemTech Focus's horn too much, but definitely joining those communities where you can talk to other founders and really understand like their challenges. And if not founding your own startup, maybe joining a FemTech startup that's already doing that, and tackling that issue or problem and solving, and that pain point, and really supporting them and just really helping women in general. And so I think that would be something that you could explore and hopefully be really helpful to you as you're, trying to grow your own FemTech idea or startup. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'm conscious of time, so we might not be able to answer all of the questions. And I think you are also answering the questions while you explain a lot of the things. So I would actually do a quick wrap up. And for those who are really interested in FemTech and understanding more, feel free to reach out to Su Wern or myself, and hopefully we'll be able to help you with more of the resources as well. But to do a very quick wrap up, I think today we touched on a lot of important things such as cultural difference, building different networks, the femtech industry, the VC industry, what is going on in the US, what's going on in Southeast Asia, and also the future of all of this. And also Su Wern also mentioned a lot of resources about FemTech Association, Coyote Ventures, and also the FemTech Focus. All of these initiatives and organizations is worth to dive into. And moving forward, I would like to thank everyone here, especially Su Wern, for telling us so much about VC and FemTech, and also sharing some of the things that you do at 500. It's very, very exciting to have a person like you who has, the US background, the FemTech background, and as a Southeast Asian here as well. And to all the audience and guests, thank you for coming and joining us today. We will send you a follow-up email, and we'll have some of the materials that Su Wern has mentioned about, as well as the report. And feel free to also join our community that we have starting on, we're putting it on WeChat for now, but we'll also get your opinion and feedback on where we should build this community, because we're also thinking of a Slack or LinkedIn or Discord. So feel free to also fill in the feedback form that we will send it to you as well. Yes, and people in the audience, feel free to put your LinkedIn in so we can connect with you as well. And yeah, thank you so much. And Su Wern, do you have anything else that you want to add before we close the session?
Yeah, no, I really wish I could have answered more questions, but yeah, feel free to like message me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'll drop my Twitter as well. Like if you have any other questions that you want to like run by it, but I really do suggest like checking out FemTech Focus and the FemTech Association of Asia. Like if you want to meet other people in the industry and really connect with people who are in FemTech or enthusiasts of FemTech or advocates of FemTech, because I think like as a whole we just